They said I took a bribe. That's what the letter looked like on the conference room table. Black ink on white paper, calm language meant to sound neutral, with my name printed like it was already guilty. By noon, my city badge didn't open doors anymore. By evening, my father-in-law was texting my wife like he'd already won. And the worst part, the evidence they had came from my own email account. Now listen, before I take you back to how a single night at a charity gala turned into the most dangerous week of my career, do me a quick favor. If you've ever watched someone get judged in a room full of silence, hit like so this story reaches the people who need it. And subscribe if you want more real, first-person stories where truth doesn't stay buried, because what I'm about to tell you isn't about drama. It's about what happens when power decides your dignity is negotiable. A few weeks earlier, my life still had a rhythm I trusted. I'm Malik Carter, 34. I work for the city in infrastructure, projects that don't make the news unless something goes wrong. My days smell like printer toner, burnt coffee, and rains soaked into concrete. My work is boring in the best way, documented, accountable, clean. I grew up on the south side of Chicago in an apartment where the walls were thin and life was loud. My mother worked double shifts at the hospital. She came home smelling like antiseptic and tiredness, washed her hands like she was trying to scrub the world off, and still sat at the kitchen table with me while I did homework. She raised me on rules. Show up on time, keep your word, don't beg for respect. And one rule she said like a prayer: the world will try to decide what you are, don't help it. By the time I met Emily, I thought I built a life no one could snatch from me. Emily and I met at a public planning forum. She was there representing a nonprofit partner, jeans, notebook, pen tapping like she was holding back impatience. After the meeting, she walked up to me and said, "You're the only one in there who actually answered the question." I laughed. That's my job. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "No, that's your character." Emily had a way of making you feel seen without making you feel examined. With her, I didn't feel like a stereotype. I felt like a man. We dated quietly at first, cheap Thai food, long walks near the lake, Sunday mornings with old jazz while she cooked eggs, and the apartment smelled like butter and coffee. She brought softness into my life without demanding I shrink to hold it. The first time she mentioned her father, her voice changed. "My dad is intense," she said, pushing noodles around her container like she was rearranging the truth into something easier. "He's old-fashioned." Old-fashioned is what people call it when they don't want to name it. We got married in a small ceremony near the water. My mother cried openly, wiping her cheeks with a napkin and whispering, "Look at God." Emily's father, Richard Whitmore, shook my hand like he was finalizing a deal. Smile polite, eyes cold. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself he'd come around. Emily moved into my apartment. She changed little things, curtains, a plant she swore she wouldn't kill, a clock that ticked too loud when the room was quiet. Most days we were good, real good. But whenever Richard was involved, the air changed. Emily got quieter, like she was bracing. And I found myself choosing words carefully, standing straighter, wearing that polite smile black men learn early, 1 part professionalism, 1 part survival. Then came the Whitmore Foundation Gala. Emily said it mattered. "Just one night," she told me, fixing my bow tie in the mirror. "Smile, make an appearance, it's important to my family." So I went. The ballroom smelled like white lilies and expensive cologne, and the floor shined like it had never held an honest footprint. A string quartet played near the stage like decoration. People laughed softly, the way people laugh when they're used to being safe. We moved through the crowd of donors and board members and friends of the foundation. Everyone's eyes did that quick scan, suit, watch, skin, posture, then decided how warm to be. Then Richard Whitmore saw us. He walked up holding a glass of amber liquor like it was part of his body. He hugged Emily the way you hug something you own, kissed her cheek, and turned to me with a smile that never reached his eyes. "This must be Malik," he said, like he was confirming a name on a spreadsheet. Good evening, Mr. Whitmore, I replied. He looked me up and down, quick, dismissive, you clean up well. Then he turned slightly to include the people around him, lifting his glass like we were entertainment. Everyone, he announced, meet my daughter's husband. Malik, he's what are you again? The room quieted in that hungry, polite way, like they wanted to see how I'd handle it. I kept my voice even. I'm a project manager, infrastructure development. Richard chuckled. Right, he builds things. He nodded like I was a novelty. Emily's always had a soft spot for community projects. Then he leaned closer, and his breath smelled like liquor and entitlement. Tell me something, boy, he said, loud enough for the nearest circle to hear. You ever been in a place like this before? Emily's hand squeezed mine, tight, warning, pleading. Not because she hadn't heard him. Because she had. And she wanted me to swallow it. I looked around that room full of polished smiles and charitable reputations. And nobody said a word. That's when I learned the most dangerous part of humiliation isn't the insult. It's the silence that teaches the bully he's safe. We stayed at that gala, another 45 minutes after Richard called me boy. 45 minutes is a long time to keep your face calm while your insides are burning. Emily guided us from circle to circle like she was moving us through shallow water, careful steps, quiet smiles, light touches to my elbow when she wanted me to laugh at something that wasn't funny. The string quartet kept playing, bright and sweet, and the room kept smelling like lilies and money and the kind of perfume that lingers after a person leaves. I watched people watch me. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed on my behalf. Most didn't look away at all. They smiled like nothing happened, like a man could be reduced in public and still be expected to behave beautifully for their comfort. Richard drifted around the room, shaking hands, laughing louder than anyone else. Every now and then, he glanced back at me like he was checking whether his lesson had landed. When the speeches started, Emily squeezed my hand again. Just get through it, she whispered, eyes shining a little too brightly. Please. I stared at the stage while donors applauded themselves for being generous. I listened to words like community and equity float through the air as if they weren't just decoration. And I felt something settle inside me, something colder than anger. Clarity. When the final applause came, Emily leaned in close. We can go now, she said quickly, like she'd been holding her breath all night. We moved toward the exit, weaving through the last clusters of guests. At coat check, Emily paused. Richard appeared beside us, like he'd been waiting. There you two are, he said, voice bright, leaving so soon. Emily smiled too fast. We've got an early morning. Richard's eyes slid to me. Malik works hard, he said, as if he knew my life. Respectable. Then he did something small, so small most people wouldn't clock it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out Emily's phone. He placed it into her hand like he was returning property. Emily took it without surprise, without question, like it was normal. And that's when my stomach tightened. Because no matter how old-fashioned a man is, there's nothing old-fashioned about holding your adult daughter's phone. Unless you're used to controlling her. Emily tucked it into her clutch quickly, eyes flicking to mine for half a second, too quick, too careful. Then Richard clapped me on the shoulder again, heavy and friendly at the same time. Good night, Malik, he said. Drive safe. I didn't respond to his performance. I just nodded. And we left. The drive home was quiet, in the way quiet can be loud. Emily cracked her window as soon as she got into the car. Cold night air rushed in, carrying city smells, exhaust, damp pavement, fried food from a corner spot still open. It was like she needed something real in her lungs after breathing that ballroom. I kept both hands on the wheel. The dashboard lights washed my fingers pale blue. For a few minutes, the only sound was the hum of tires and the occasional hiss of a bus passing. Then I said it. He called me boy. Emily's shoulders rose on a breath and fell. I know. You heard him, I said. Yes. She whispered, I heard him. And you squeezed my hand, I said, not accusing, just numbing. Like you were asking me to swallow it. Emily turned her head toward the window. Streetlights slid across her face in moving stripes. I was trying to keep it from turning into something worse, she said. I felt my jaw tighten. Worse than that. Emily's voice got thin. Malik, he's my father. I stared at the road ahead, blinking slowly. And I'm your husband. She flinched, like the words hit somewhere tender. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't call her names. I just asked the question that sat in my chest like a stone. Why did he have your phone? Emily's fingers tightened around her clutch strap. He did have it. He pulled it out of his jacket, I said calmly. Emily. She swallowed. He thought it would be safer if I didn't have it out. Those events people steal. I let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there wasn't humor in it. At a room full of people wearing watches that cost more than my car. Emily's eyes shone. She didn't answer. We drove the rest of the way in silence. When we got upstairs, Emily kicked off her heels and lined them up neatly by the door like order could fix everything. The apartment greeted us with warmth, our little lamp glowing in the corner, the vanilla candle she'd lit earlier still faint in the air. Normal. Too normal. Emily walked into the bedroom to take her makeup off. I stood in the living room staring at the blank TV screen, watching my reflection stare back. I didn't want to fight. But I also didn't want to live in a marriage where my wife asked me to make myself smaller so her father could feel bigger. A soft buzz came from her clutch. A notification. One, then another. Emily didn't come out. I stood there a long minute, telling myself not to do it, telling myself trust matters, telling myself I wasn't the kind of man who went digging. Then I heard Richard's voice in my head again, boy, and remembered the room's silence. I walked to the entry table and opened Emily's clutch. Her phone was face down. I didn't pick it up at first. I just stared at it like it might bite. Then I lifted it. The screen lit up. 3 messages, preview visible, a contact saved as RW. My stomach sank. I didn't need a code to read the previews. RW, don't mention tonight to him. RW, he's already sensitive. You know how they are. RW, remember what's at stake. I stood there frozen. You know how they are. Not men, not husbands, not Malik. They. A category, a warning label. I put the phone back exactly where it was and closed the clutch carefully, like I was handling something fragile that could shatter and cut us both. A few minutes later, Emily walked out in an oversized t-shirt, hair down, face freshly washed. She looked softer, younger, like the woman who used to dance in our kitchen while eggs cooked and jazz played low. She stopped when she saw me standing there. You're still up, she said carefully. Yeah, I replied. Couldn't sleep. She moved closer. I'm sorry about tonight. I nodded once. Okay. Emily's eyes searched mine like she was trying to find the version of me who would let this go. What's wrong? She asked, voice small. I kept my tone calm. Your dad texted you. Emily blinked. What? He said not to mention tonight to me, I continued, watching her face. He said, you know how they are. And he said, remember what's at stake. The color drained from her cheeks. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Malik, she whispered. I didn't let myself harden into cruelty. I just asked, quietly, what's at stake, Emily? Her eyes filled immediately. And the way she looked at me then, like a woman caught between fear and love, told me this wasn't about one ugly word at a gala. This was about control. And control always has a price. Emily's voice shook when she finally spoke. It's my mother, she whispered. I felt my chest go tight. Your mother. Emily wiped at her tears quickly, ashamed of them. She's getting worse, she said. Her memory, her balance. Dad's paying for her care. He reminds me of that. I sat down slowly, like my legs suddenly understood what my mind was trying to process. Emily, I said very carefully, Is he using your mother to control you? She looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers until they went pale. Then she nodded. Once. Small. But it broke something open in the room. And I realized, sitting there under the warm light of our apartment, that my father-in-law hadn't just insulted me. He'd marked me. And if Richard Whitmore was willing to humiliate me in public, he would be willing to do worse in private, especially if he thought my silence was guaranteed. For a long moment after Emily said my mother, neither of us moved. The clock on the wall ticked in the silence. The vanilla candle on the shelf had burned low, and the scent that usually made our apartment feel warm suddenly felt wrong, like sweetness trying to cover something rotten. I kept my voice gentle, because I could see how close Emily was to falling apart. Tell me what he said, I asked. Emily's fingers twisted together in her lap. He didn't say it like a threat, she whispered. He never does. He says it like he's being practical. Practical, I repeated. She nodded quickly, tears slipping down her cheeks. He said Mom's facility is expensive, that there are upgrades the doctors recommend, private therapies, more one-on-one support. He said he's doing the best he can. I watched her face, and I could see the little girl in her, the one who learned early that love could be taken away if she didn't behave correctly. And what does he want from you? I asked. Emily's lips parted, then pressed closed. When she spoke, it came out thin. He wants me to help him, she said. With what? I asked, even though a part of me already knew. She swallowed. He wants access. Access to what, Emily? Her eyes lifted to mine, wet and ashamed. To you. That landed in my chest like a heavy, quiet thing. Explain, I said calmly. She wiped her cheeks with the heel of her hand, frustrated with her own tears. He thinks you're connected because you work for the city, she said. He thinks you can open doors. I sat back slightly, feeling the edge of the couch under my palms. Doors to what? Emily looked down. Contracts. There it was, plain, ugly, real. Has he asked you for details? I asked. Emily nodded once, barely. He asked what projects you're on, who you work with. He asked if you're on any committees. My stomach tightened. And what did you tell him? I asked. Emily's voice cracked. I told him you were busy. I told him you couldn't talk about work. I told him you wouldn't do anything wrong. And, I said softly because I could hear the "and" in her breathing. Emily's shoulders sagged. And I told him you were on a selection committee. The room went quiet again, this time not from shock, but from the heavy understanding of what that meant. I didn't yell. I didn't jump up. I just stared at my wife, trying to keep my voice steady. You told him something I didn't even tell you, I said. Emily shook her head quickly. You mentioned it weeks ago, she pleaded. You said you had to sign extra paperwork. You didn't call it that, But you understood, I finished. Emily nodded, sobbing now, her breath catching. I didn't think it mattered. I didn't think he could do anything with that information. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Emily, your father doesn't ask questions for fun. I know, she whispered. I know. I sat with that for a beat. Then I asked the question that mattered most to me, the one that separated bad conversation from real danger. Did he ask you for my password? I said. Emily's eyes squeezed shut like she wished she could disappear. Yes. I felt heat crawl up my neck. And did you give it to him? I asked, careful not to accuse with my tone, just asking. No, she said quickly. No, Malik, I swear, I told him no. I told him it would ruin you. My throat tightened. Did he believe you? Emily laughed once, bitter and broken. He doesn't believe in no. He believes in time. He thinks everyone eventually caves. I let out a slow breath. Okay. Emily looked up at me like she was waiting for punishment. I didn't give her that. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, grounding myself in simple motions, filling a glass with water, feeling the cold through the glass, listening to the faucet hiss. Behind me, Emily said quietly, Malik, I'm scared. I turned, holding the water. I'm scared too, I admitted, but we're going to be smart. I sat back down and placed the glass on the coffee table between us like a small barrier. From this moment on, I said, we don't discuss my work with your father, not a single detail. Not who I'm meeting with, not what I'm reviewing, nothing. Emily nodded fast. Okay. And, I added, if he contacts me directly about work, I end the conversation immediately. Emily swallowed. He won't like that. I don't care what he likes, I said, still calm. I care what keeps us safe. Emily's eyes filled again, but she nodded. I stood. I'm going to take a shower. She whispered, Malik, please don't leave me. I paused in the hallway and looked back at her. I'm not leaving you tonight, I said, but I am done being managed in your father's presence. Emily covered her mouth, nodding as if those words finally named what she'd been doing. The next morning, the apartment smelled like burnt toast and coffee. Emily had made breakfast like she always did after a hard night. Eggs, toast, fruit, like feeding me could mend something inside us. The toast was darker than usual, one corner nearly black. Her hands were unsteady when she set the plate down. Are we okay? She asked softly. I didn't lie to her. We're honest, I said. That's what we are today. Emily's throat moved. Okay. Before I left for work, I noticed something small. My work laptop on the desk in the living room sat just slightly angled, only a few inches, but wrong enough to catch my eye. I always left it squared with the edge of the desk. Always. I stared at it for a second, feeling my stomach tighten. I didn't accuse Emily. Not yet. I didn't ask a question I wasn't ready to hear answered. I just closed my hand around my car keys and said, I'll see you tonight. Emily looked at me like she wanted to confess something. Then she just nodded. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, I said, and it was true. Love was the one thing in this mess that didn't feel like a lie. At City Hall, everything smelled like routine, cleaning solution on tile, printer toner, the slightly sour scent of old coffee. My coworkers laughed near the break room. Someone complained about the copier. The world kept moving like nothing had changed. But my body knew better. I sat at my desk and called it. Help desk, a man answered. This is Aaron. This is Malik Carter, infrastructure, I said. I need to check whether there were any unusual login attempts on my account. A reason, Aaron asked. Just tightening security, I said. Keyboard clicks, a pause. Okay, Aaron said. Looks like your credentials were entered incorrectly 3 times last night. My heart sank. What time? 9:41 p.m. My mouth went dry. That was the exact window when I'd been in the bathroom with the shower running, thinking about Richard Whitmore's smile and Emily's tears. Was it from my device? I asked. No, Aaron replied. External web login attempt, not from our internal network. I stared at the wall in front of my desk, the city seal framed in cheap gold. Lock it down, I said quietly. Force a password reset, add multi-factor, flag it. Done, Aaron said, and his voice sharpened with concern. I'll escalate to security ops. When I hung up, I sat still for a moment, feeling that cold clarity again. Someone had tried to get into my work account from outside. And someone in Emily's family had already shown me he didn't respect boundaries. I opened my email inbox. A new message notification sat there like a pebble that could start an avalanche. From Richard Whitmore. Subject, dinner tonight. I didn't open it right away. I watched the subject line as if it might change. Then I clicked. Malik. Let's talk man to man. No hard feelings about last night. Come by at 7. Richard. No apology, no accountability, just a summons. I leaned back in my chair and felt my pulse steady into something firm. Because now I understood. Richard Whitmore wasn't going to stop. And whatever he was planning, it was already moving, quietly, efficiently, through the same systems that were supposed to keep people like me safe. I stared at Richard's email until my eyes started to ache. It wasn't the invitation that bothered me most. It was the certainty in it. Like he already assumed I'd show up, already assumed my pride would be small enough to fit inside his home and behave. I didn't answer the email. Instead, I stood up, walked to Denise's office, and knocked lightly on the doorframe. Denise looked up from her computer. Her hair was pulled back, neat twists, reading glasses low on her nose. She had the kind of calm that didn't come from comfort. It came from experience. "You got a minute?" I asked. She studied me for half a second, then nodded toward the chair. "Close the door." As soon as it clicked, she leaned back. "Talk." I sat down slowly. "I called it this morning," I said. "There were external login attempts on my city credentials last night." Denise's expression tightened. "You report it." "Help desk escalated it. I'm going to follow up with compliance," I said. Denise nodded once, approving. Then she tapped her pen against her desk, thoughtful. "Anything else?" she asked. I hesitated. My throat felt dry. "I got an email from my father-in-law." Denise's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Who's your father-in-law?" "Richard Whitmore," I said. That name landed in her office like a weight. Denise didn't gasp. She didn't look impressed. She just stared at me, and her voice dropped a little. "Okay," she said. "That's not nothing." I nodded. "He wants me at his house tonight." Denise exhaled, slow. "Malik, listen to me. You need to keep your work and your marriage in separate rooms. If those rooms start bleeding into each other, the city will not protect you the way you deserve." I swallowed. "I'm trying." Denise leaned forward. "Let me ask you something straight. Has anybody, any vendor, mentioned your name like you're already tied to them?" My stomach tightened. "Why?" Denise looked at me carefully. "Procurement called this morning. Someone from Whitmore Development checked in and spoke as if you were already aligned." My pulse thumped once hard. "What did they say?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Denise picked up a note from her desk. "They said, Malik understands how to keep things moving. Like you were a sure thing." I sat very still. That wasn't me. "I know," Denise said, "but I'm telling you what's forming in the air." I nodded slowly, feeling the edges of a trap I still couldn't fully see. Denise slid a business card across the desk. "Lillian Cho, Ethics and Compliance, call her today." "I will," I promised. Denise held my gaze. "And Malik?" "Yeah." "Do not go to that man's house alone if you can help it," she said. "And if you do go, keep it short. He's not inviting you for dinner. He's inviting you into a narrative." I swallowed. "Okay." When I left her office, my hands were cold. I walked back to my desk and made the call. Lillian Cho's voice was crisp, but not unkind. She asked questions like she was building a wall around me, slow, careful, practical. When she told me to document everything, tighten my personal security, and recuse myself from anything involving Whitmore Development, I agreed, even though the word recuse tasted like losing ground I hadn't done anything to forfeit. After the call, I sat at my desk with my eyes on the computer screen and felt something settle into place. This wasn't just family tension. This was a professional threat with a family mask. That evening, I told Emily I was going to her parents' house. She was at the kitchen counter chopping onions, but she stopped mid-slice. Her eyes lifted toward me, and I saw fear flicker across her face before she pushed it down. "He asked you," she said quietly. "He emailed," I replied. "He wants to talk." Emily set the knife down carefully like she didn't trust her hands. "Malik, please, just don't provoke him." I looked at her. "Emily, existing isn't provoking him." Her lips trembled. "I know." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "I'm not going to argue with him. I'm not going to discuss my work. I'm going to hold boundaries, and then I'm leaving." Emily nodded, swallowing hard. "Okay." "Are you coming?" I asked. Emily hesitated, just a beat too long, then she nodded. "Yes, I'll come." I was relieved, but not comforted. Because the hesitation told me she was measuring consequences, I still didn't fully understand. The The Whitmore house looked different at night. Warm lights in tall windows, hedges trimmed like they'd never seen a wild thought, a quiet neighborhood where even the air sounded expensive. Inside, it smelled like rosemary and garlic and polished wood. Dinner simmered somewhere. Classical music played softly from unseen speakers, the kind that was meant to make you feel civilized. Richard met us in the entryway, holding a glass like it was a part of his hand. "Emily," he said, kissing her cheek. Then he looked at me. "Malik." His smile was smooth. His eyes weren't. We sat at a long dining table set with heavy silverware and cloth napkins folded into shapes that looked like they required training. Candles flickered. A bowl of lemons sat in the center like decoration, perfect and untouched. Diane Whitmore sat at the far end of the table with a cardigan over her shoulders. She looked smaller than I remembered, hands resting neatly in her lap like she was trying not to take up space. When she saw us, her face softened. "Emily," she whispered, and there was relief in it. "Malik, hello, dear." "Hello, Ms. Whitmore," I said gently. Richard poured wine for Emily. He poured nothing for Diane, just topped off her water as if he'd decided what was appropriate for her. Then he lifted his own glass. "To family," he said, looking at me, "and to understanding." I didn't raise my glass right away. I waited until he looked away. Dinner began with polite talk, foundation events, donations, a story Richard told about running into the right people in the right rooms. Emily spoke carefully, like each word had been weighed. Diane smiled occasionally, but her eyes drifted, unfocused for moments, then returned. And then Richard did it, slid the blade in as if it was conversation. "So, Malik," he said casually, "I hear the city's about to break ground on some major upgrades." Emily's fork froze. I kept my voice even. "I can't discuss city business." Richard smiled. Of course, I'm not asking you to violate policy." He waved his hand like he was brushing away a fly. "Just general talk, big picture." "I'm not discussing it," I said again. Richard's smile thinned. "Very disciplined," he murmured. "That's good. A man should be disciplined." He took a sip of wine, eyes on me. "A man should know when to speak and when to stay quiet." The air at the table tightened. Diane shifted in her chair, fingers tugging lightly at her cardigan sleeve. Emily stared at her plate. Richard leaned back as if nothing was happening. "Anyway," he said brightly, "have you tried the steak? Excellent cut." I chewed without tasting. After dinner, he insisted we move into his office for a quick chat. Emily started to follow, but Richard glanced at her. "Stay with your mother," he said, tone gentle but final. Emily looked at me, worry in her eyes. I gave her a small nod that said I'm okay, even though my stomach was already tight. Richard's office smelled faintly of cigar smoke and leather. Framed photos of him with politicians, awards on shelves, books that looked chosen for appearances. He closed the door behind us. "Now," he said, setting his glass down, "we can speak freely." I stayed standing. "I won't be here long." Richard smiled like he found that cute. "I respect a man with boundaries." Then he opened a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. My chest tightened immediately. "What is that?" I asked. Richard held it like it was nothing. "A retainer," he said, "for consulting." "I don't consult," I replied. "You could," he said smoothly. "Everybody does. You're a smart man. You know how the city works." I stared at him. "If you're asking me to influence procurement, the answer is no." Richard chuckled as if I'd accused him of stealing candy. "Influence, such an ugly word." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm talking about helping family, making introductions, keeping things moving." I felt my jaw tighten. "No." Richard's eyes hardened for a fraction of a second before his smile returned. "Principal," he murmured. "Beautiful thing, but principal doesn't pay for private care facilities." The words hit like cold water. "Don't use Diane," I said quietly. Richard's smile didn't move. "I'm not using her. I'm explaining reality. Your wife loves her mother. You love your wife. We all make sacrifices." I looked at him, and the calm in me turned into something sharper. "You're not asking for sacrifice," I said. "You're asking for corruption." Richard's gaze narrowed. "Careful," he said softly. "Men like you don't get the benefit of the doubt when accusations start flying." My blood went cold. Accusations. There it was, his real weapon. I took a slow breath. "Put whatever you want in writing," I said. "Email me. If it's legal, you shouldn't mind." Richard's jaw tightened. Then he smiled again, but it was thinner now. "You think paper protects you." "It protects the truth," I replied. I walked to the door. My hand was on the knob when he spoke again. "One more thing, Malik," Richard said, voice light. "If you're going to be part of this family, learn when to stop fighting the tide." I didn't turn around. "I'm not fighting," I said quietly. "I'm refusing to drown." Then I left. Emily met me in the hallway, eyes wide and wet. Diane sat behind her in a chair, staring into space, hands folded neatly. "What happened?" Emily whispered. "I'm going home," I said. Emily looked back toward Richard's office like she could already feel him pulling at her. Then she looked at me. "I'm coming," she said, voice shaking. We walked out together. And I didn't feel relieved. I felt watched. Because a threat like Richard just made, quiet, confident, specific, doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a plan that's already moving. On the drive home, Emily didn't speak. The streetlights cut across the windshield in pale stripes, and every time we passed a red light, I could see her reflection in the glass. Eyes fixed forward, jaw clenched, hands folded in her lap like she was trying not to spill herself apart. My own hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying Richard's voice. "Men like you don't get the benefit of the doubt when accusations start flying. That wasn't a warning you make unless you've already decided what story you want told." When we got back to our apartment, Emily kicked off her shoes, then stood in the entryway like she forgot what she came home to do. The air smelled like the onions she'd been chopping earlier, sweet and sharp, lingering in the curtains. I locked the door behind us and slid the chain, something I hadn't done in years. Emily noticed. "Malik," she whispered, "he's not going to come here." I didn't look at her. "I'm not locking him out," I said quietly. "I'm locking the world out until I can think." Emily's breath caught. She nodded once and walked to the bedroom. A minute later, I heard the soft sound of a drawer opening, then closing, the sound of fabric shifting, the quiet, uneven rhythm of her breathing as she tried not to cry too loud. I sat in the living room and opened my personal laptop. Not my work device, not the city. Mine. The screen lit up, and for a moment I just stared at it, letting my eyes adjust to the glow. The room was dim except for the lamp Emily insisted on, warm light that made everything look calmer than it felt. I logged into my personal email. My inbox loaded normally. No threats, no obvious chaos. Then I clicked my sent folder, and my stomach dropped so fast I felt dizzy. There was an email sent the night of the gala. Timestamp, 9:39 p.m. To a Whitmore Development contact address. Subject, quick note. Message, let's talk tomorrow. I can help move things along, call me. I read it twice, then a third time. That wasn't my voice. I don't write like that. I don't offer help like that. I don't talk like a man trying to sound slick. But there it was, my name, my account, my timestamp. My skin went cold. I clicked into the message details and scrolled down. At the bottom, in small text, sent from iPhone. I stared at those 3 words until my eyes burned. I don't send emails from an iPhone. I turned off that signature years ago. I barely send anything from my phone at all unless it's urgent. And at 9:41 p.m., it said someone tried to log into my city credentials from an outside IP. 2 minutes after that, email went out. My chest tightened, not with rage, worse, certainty. I took screenshots of the email, the timestamp, the sent from iPhone line. Then I opened my account security settings and checked recent activity. A list of devices appeared. And there it was. iPhone last active 9:38 p.m. Not mine. I changed my password immediately. Long, random, nothing Emily would ever guess. I turned on two-factor authentication and forced logout from all devices. My hands were steady as I typed. This wasn't panic. This was survival. Then I sat back and stared into the quiet. In the bedroom, Emily's sobs rose and fell like she was trying to hold them in with her teeth. I stood and walked to the door. My hand rested on the knob for a long moment before I turned it. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed with her face in her hands. She looked up when I entered, eyes red, cheeks wet, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like a woman who'd been running from a truth her whole life and finally hit a wall. "Malik," she whispered, voice breaking, "I'm sorry." I didn't sit beside her. I sat in the chair across the room so I wouldn't touch her before I understood what I was holding. "There's an email in my sent folder," I said calmly. "To your father's company. It was sent the night of the gala." Emily blinked like she didn't understand the words at first. "What email?" I held my phone out with the screenshot. Her eyes moved across the screen. Her mouth parted. Then she shook her head hard. No, Malik, I didn't." "I didn't say you did," I replied, quiet and steady. "I'm asking you to help me understand how it happened." Emily's hands started trembling. She pressed them together like she could force them still. "My phone," she whispered. I waited. Emily swallowed. "He had my phone," she said, "at the gala." My jaw tightened. "You told me he was holding it for safety." Emily flinched. "I lied," she admitted, voice cracking. "Because I didn't want you to see how normal it is for him. He checks it. He always has. He says it's to protect me." I stared at her. "Does he know your passcode?" Emily nodded, shame flooding her face. "Yes." I kept my voice calm, even as something in me hardened. "Do you have my email logged in on your phone?" Emily froze. Then she whispered, "Yes." The room went so quiet, I could hear the air moving through the vent. "When?" I asked. Her voice came out thin. "When we planned the honeymoon," she said. "You asked me to check a confirmation. I logged in and I never logged out." I closed my eyes for 1 second. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because I needed to absorb what carelessness had given a controlling man the chance to ruin me. "So your father had your phone," I said, opening my eyes. "Your phone had my email, and an email went out from my account saying I could help move things along." Emily nodded, crying again. "He did it," she whispered. "He did it to set you up." I watched her carefully. The fear in her didn't look staged. It looked old. It looked like she'd been taught to shrink before his anger and call it love. "I believe you," I said, and she sobbed harder like belief was the one thing she didn't deserve but needed anyway. Then I leaned forward slightly. "But Emily," I said, voice firm now, "believing you doesn't fix the damage. We have to act." She wiped her face. "Tell me what to do." "Give me your phone," I said. Emily hesitated for a fraction of a second, then reached for it on the nightstand and placed it in my hand like she was surrendering a weapon. I didn't search it like a jealous husband. I treated it like evidence. I removed my email account from her device. I changed her passcode settings with her watching. I turned off any location sharing we could find. I checked her messages with Richard. There were new ones. "RW, he didn't take the offer well. That's fine." "RW, he'll come around when he understands how much he has to lose." Emily covered her mouth, a strangled sound leaving her throat. "He's talking about you she whispered. "Like a stubborn employee," I finished. I set her phone down gently. "Emily, we're done pretending this is family conflict. This is coercion." She nodded, trembling. I stood. "I'm calling compliance again, and I'm calling my union rep." Emily grabbed my hand. "Malik, are they going to believe you?" I looked down at her fingers gripping mine. "They'll believe documentation," I said. "They'll believe timelines. They'll believe patterns." Emily's voice broke. And if they do? I thought about Richard's smile, the way he said accusations like he was tasting the word. Then we make it impossible to ignore, I said quietly. The next morning at work, my office felt colder. Not physically, emotionally. People still smiled, but their smiles had that cautious edge like they'd heard something and didn't know what to do with it yet. Denise called me into her office first thing. She shut the door and didn't offer me coffee. That vendor check-in I told you about, she said. It's not just talk anymore. My stomach tightened. What happened? Denise slid a printed page across her desk. A formal complaint. Whitmore Development. Allegation. Improper solicitation in exchange for influence. My name was there. My throat went dry. They filed it. Denise nodded, eyes steady. And Malik compliance wants you upstairs, now. I stared at the paper, then looked up at Denise. Am I suspended? Not yet, she said carefully. But you need to prepare yourself for what this turns into. I stood slowly, forcing my body to stay calm. Okay. Denise's voice softened just a little. You did the right thing reporting early, she said. That matters. I nodded, but the truth was, my hands still felt cold. Because this was the moment Richard Whitmore wanted. The moment where the system did what it always does when someone with power points at someone like me. It pauses. It watches. And it waits to see if I'll crumble. I picked up the complaint and walked toward the elevator, my heartbeat steady, my jaw tight. Not because I wasn't scared. Because I refused to be sloppy. Compliance was on the 3rd floor in a wing of City Hall that always felt a little too quiet. The hallway carpet swallowed footsteps. The air smelled like recycled ventilation and dry paper. Even the lights had a different tone, brighter, colder, like they didn't believe in comfort. Denise walked me up there without saying much. She didn't need to. Her presence said what her mouth didn't: stay steady. Don't give them anything to twist. Outside the conference room, Victor Ramirez, my union rep, was already waiting. He was stocky, late 40s, with a tie loosened like he'd been pulled into this fast. He shook my hand once, firm. Carter, he said low, you say as little as possible, you answer what's asked. Facts only, you understand. I understand, I said. He nodded toward the door. Let's go. Inside, the room was small and windowless. A long table. A pitcher of water that tasted like plastic. A box of tissues placed in the center like they expected tears. Lillian Cho sat at one end with a folder. A city attorney sat beside her with a laptop open. Both of them wore the kind of calm you develop when your job is other people's messes. Lillian gave me a short nod. Mr. Carter, thank you for coming. I sat, hands folded on the table, and forced myself to breathe slowly through my nose. The attorney began. This is a preliminary review of an allegation regarding procurement interference and solicitation of compensation. You are not being accused at this time, but you are named in a formal complaint. My mouth was dry. Understood. Did you send an email from your personal account to Whitmore Development on the night of the Whitmore Foundation Gala? The attorney asked. No, I said. Lillian's eyes stayed on mine. Do you have reason to believe your account was accessed by someone else? Yes, I replied, through my wife's phone. Victor lifted a hand slightly. And we wanted on record that my member reported suspicious contact and external login attempts before this complaint was filed. The attorney nodded without looking up. Noted. They asked me to walk through the timeline. I did, carefully. Gala public insult, Richard possessing Emily's phone, the text messages, the remember what's at stake, dinner in his office, the envelope, the warning about accusations, the email in my sent folder with sent from iPhone, it confirming external login attempts at 9:41 p.m., the vendor rep speaking like I was aligned. When I finished, I slid my printed screenshots across the table. Email, timestamp, device signature. The text messages from Richard that Emily had saved. Lillian scanned them, and her expression tightened just slightly, like a puzzle piece had clicked into place. The attorney's voice stayed flat. Effective immediately, you will be placed on paid administrative leave while we conduct the review. My stomach sank anyway. Paid leave still feels like shame when you know how people talk. Okay, I said quietly. You will surrender your access badge and city-issued devices, the attorney continued. It will image them. Victor leaned forward. We comply, and we want the record to reflect standard procedure, not admission. Noted, the attorney repeated. Lillian looked at me, and her voice softened a fraction. Malik, keep doing what you're doing, document. Don't discuss this informally, and don't communicate with Whitmore Development or Richard Whitmore directly. I won't, I said. When I left that room, my laptop sat in a plain cardboard box that made it look smaller than it was. Denise walked me to the elevator. At the doors she paused, eyes steady on me. This is where people start talking, she said quietly. I know. And this is where you stay clean, she said. Don't let anger make you careless. I held her gaze. I won't. The doors closed. And I watched my own reflection in the brushed metal. Face calm, eyes tired, box held tight like proof I still had something to carry. Emily was waiting at home, like she'd been holding her breath for hours. The apartment smelled like lemon cleaner and onions, the same two notes, sharp and sharp. She'd scrubbed the counters so hard the sponge tore. I could see it in the trash. Her eyes went straight to the box. They did it, she whispered. Administrative leave, I said. Paid, but yes. She pressed her palm to her mouth, her eyes filled. Malik, I'm so sorry. I set the box down gently on the couch. Being sorry won't protect us, I said, not cruelly, just truthfully. We need a plan. Emily nodded fast, almost desperate. Okay, tell me. I'm calling James, I said. Pastor James Holloway had married us. He was also an attorney, quiet, sharp, not impressed by money. When he answered, his voice was steady. Malik. I told him everything again, only tighter this time, like a man who'd learned facts were armor. He didn't waste my time. 3 steps, James said. 1, we send preservation letters tonight to Whitmore Foundation, Whitmore Development, and the gala venue. We demand they preserve all surveillance footage, any Wi-Fi access logs if they exist, and communications involving your name. Emily leaned in close, eyes wide. 2, James continued, we file a police report for unauthorized access to your personal email. Not because we expect fireworks tomorrow, because we need an official record that you reported it promptly. Emily swallowed. Police. James's tone stayed calm. Paper is protection, we want dates, we want receipts. And 3, he said, we send a formal cease and desist to Richard Whitmore regarding harassment and interference. He doesn't get to threaten you and then pretend it's family business. I exhaled slowly. Okay. After I hung up, Emily sat very still. You're really going to do this, she whispered. I have to, I said. If I don't, he'll do it again. Maybe to me, maybe to the next person who doesn't have a union rep and an attorney. Emily's throat moved. He's going to punish my mom. That fear had been living behind her eyes for days. I sat across from her. Then we handle your mom too, I said. We stop letting him use her like a leash. The next day, we went to Diane's facility. The lobby smelled like lemon disinfectant and flowers that had been sitting too long in water. A fountain burbled softly, trying to sound peaceful. The staff smiled with trained warmth. Emily's hands shook as she approached the desk. I'm Emily Carter, she said. Diane Whitmore is my mother. I need to speak to the administrator about her contact and access list. The receptionist's smile tightened slightly. Mr. Whitmore. I am her daughter, Emily said, voice steadier than I'd heard it in days. Please. The administrator, Marissa, met us in a glass-walled office. She listened, then said carefully, Mr. Whitmore is listed as responsible party. He requested limited visitation for stability. Emily's jaw tightened. My mother wants to see me, she said, and I want my contact information on file. I want updates. I want to be included. Marissa studied Emily for a long moment, then nodded. We can document Diane's preferences during a lucid period, she said. That helps. If there are disputes, you may need legal support. Emily lifted her chin. We have a lawyer. Marissa's posture shifted, subtle but real. All right, she said. Then we'll do this properly. We walked out into the parking lot, and Emily's phone buzzed. She looked down and her face went pale. She turned the screen toward me. Dad, I spoke to Marissa. She knows you're confused. Stop harassing the staff. Emily's breathing sped up. How did he know we were here? He's watching you, I said quietly. Or he still has access. Emily's hands fumbled as she opened her settings. I changed my passcode, she whispered, almost panicked. Not enough, I said. We reset everything today. Apple ID, email, location sharing, all of it. We sat in the car and did it right there, sunlight pouring through the windshield like it didn't know what kind of fight we were in. When Emily finally finished, she leaned back and stared at the ceiling. I feel sick, she whispered, like I'm waking up in the middle of my own life. I reached for her hand. You're waking up, I said. That's not sickness, that's clarity. Her eyes filled again. She squeezed my fingers hard. And in that moment, I understood something about revenge I had never learned from anger. The kind of revenge that shocks the world isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet, disciplined decision to stop letting power hide behind family. That night, James emailed the preservation letters, while Emily and I sat at our kitchen table like two people waiting for bad weather to pass. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking clock and the occasional creak of pipes in the walls. Emily kept rubbing her thumb over the rim of her mug. The coffee inside had gone cold, but she held it anyway, like warmth was something she could summon by force. When James forwarded me the final copies, the emails were simple and firm. No insults, no accusations dressed up as drama. Just requests. Preserve all surveillance footage from the gala venue for the date and time of the Whitmore Foundation event. Preserve any internal incident reports. Preserve vendor communications mentioning my name. Preserve, preserve, preserve. It was strange, seeing my life reduced to that word. Emily read over my shoulder, eyes scanning each line. He's going to lose it, she whispered. I didn't answer, not because I didn't agree, but because I'd learned something about Richard Whitmore. He didn't lose it the way regular people lose it. He escalated quietly, professionally, through channels that made his cruelty look like business. The next morning, James met me at a small police precinct downtown. I hated being there. Not because I had anything to hide, because I knew what it felt like to walk into a place like that and already be seen as suspicious before you open your mouth. The waiting room smelled like bleach and old coffee. A TV mounted in the corner played the news too loudly. Someone behind the glass window chewed gum with their mouth open, like it was their right. James sat beside me, calm in a navy suit, hands folded neatly. He looked like a man who'd learned to be unbothered in spaces built to make you feel small. When an officer finally called my name, James stood with me. The officer, a young guy pale, tired, led us to a desk and asked, "So what's going on?" James gave me a small nod, like slow and steady. "I'm here to file a report for unauthorized access to my personal email account," I said. The officer's eyebrows lifted. "Hacked." "Unauthorized access," I repeated, careful. "I have reason to believe a third party used a device to access my email and send a message impersonating me." The officer typed slowly, eyes half on his screen. "Do you know who did it?" "I have suspicions," I said, "but I'm not here to guess. I'm here to document that it happened and when I discovered it." James added, calm and professional, "My client has screenshots of the email, timestamps, and device indicators. He also has documentation that he reported the issue to his employer's compliance office before a complaint was filed against him." That got the officer's attention. He asked for copies. We provided them. He asked questions. I answered only what was true and provable. When we left the precinct, the air outside felt sharper, like the city had teeth again. Emily called the moment she knew we'd be done. "How did it go?" she asked, voice tight. "We filed it," I said. "Report number and everything." There was a pause on the line. Then she whispered, "Okay." That one word carried so much. Fear, relief, grief. Because filing a police report shouldn't feel like an act of self-defense in a marriage. But here we were. By afternoon, Richard made his next move. It came through Emily's brother. His name was Andrew Whitmore, tall, clean-cut, always polite in the shallow way people are polite when they don't want to get involved. He'd been at our wedding, shook my hand, called me man, like that meant something. He called Emily first. She put it on speaker because her hands were shaking. Andrew said, voice tense. "What the hell is going on?" Emily swallowed. "Dad is trying to destroy Malik's job." A sharp breath. "That's not what Dad said." "What did he say?" I asked, stepping closer to the phone. Andrew paused, like he hadn't expected to hear my voice. "He said Malik tried to," he stopped. "He said there's an investigation." "There is," I said, "because your father filed a complaint after I refused to help him, and someone used my email to make it look like I offered." Andrew's voice tightened. "Dad says you're twisting things." Emily's eyes filled. "Andrew," she said, voice breaking, "Dad has my passcode. He had my phone at the gala. He uses Mom's care to control me." Silence. Then Andrew said, quieter, "Don't say that." That hit me harder than I expected. Not because of Andrew. Because it showed me how the whole family survived Richard, by not saying the true words out loud. Emily's jaw tightened. "It's true." Andrew's voice went cold. "He's paying for Mom. He's doing everything." Emily whispered, "He's paying, Andrew. That doesn't mean he owns her, or me." Andrew exhaled sharply. "Dad said if you keep this up, he's cutting you off." Emily's face went pale. My chest tightened. I watched her swallow hard like she was swallowing her childhood. Then she said, steady and quiet, "Then let him." Andrew went silent again. "You don't mean that," he murmured. Emily looked at me for a second, then back at the phone. "I do," she said. "Because if he can only love me when I'm obedient, that's not love, that's control." Andrew didn't respond for a beat. Then he said, softer, "Emily, just come home. Let's talk like a family." Emily laughed once, small, broken. "We are talking," she said. "You're just asking me to lie so you don't feel uncomfortable." Andrew's tone tightened again. "This is going to destroy Dad." Emily's eyes hardened. "Dad is destroying himself." She ended the call with a trembling thumb and sat down slowly, like her legs finally admitted how heavy that was. I knelt beside her chair. "You okay?" She nodded, but it wasn't convincing. "I feel like I just betrayed something," she whispered. "You didn't betray anything," I said. "You told the truth." Emily's eyes filled again. "In my family, the truth is treated like violence." I sat back on my heels and felt that sentence settle deep. Late that evening, James forwarded me an email reply from the gala venue, the Meridian Ballroom. It wasn't warm, it was careful, corporate. But it was the first real crack in Richard's wall. "Mr. Holloway, we acknowledge receipt of your preservation request. All relevant footage for the date in question has been placed on legal hold pending subpoena or court order." Meridian Ballroom Management. Legal hold. Meaning the footage existed. Meaning it mattered. I handed my phone to Emily. She read it twice. "So it's there," she whispered. "It's there," I confirmed. Emily's voice shook. "Malik, what if the footage shows him taking my phone?" "Then it shows it," I said, and my own voice surprised me with how steady it was. Because I could finally see the shape of this. Richard's whole plan depended on one thing. No proof. He could call me boy in public and rely on silence. He could send a forged email and rely on confusion. He could file a complaint and rely on the system's automatic suspicion. But footage doesn't care who your father is. Footage doesn't care how much money you donate. Footage only shows what happened. The next morning, Lillian Cho called me. Her voice was calm, but there was a different edge to it now, like the situation had moved from possible conflict to active concern. "Malik," she said, "compliance received the formal complaint. We're now coordinating with the city attorney's office. We'll likely need subpoenas for venue footage and relevant communications." "I already had my attorney send preservation letters," I said. "I know," she replied. "That was smart." I swallowed. "What do you need from me?" "Continue to refrain from contact with Whitmore Development," she said. "And Malik, if anyone approaches you, friends, colleagues, people offering advice, do not discuss details. Even sympathetic people can become leaks." "I understand," I said. When I hung up, I stared at my phone for a moment. Then another message came in, this time to my number from a blocked caller. "No name, no number, just words. You should have taken the deal. Now you'll learn how the real world works." My stomach turned. Emily looked over from the couch. "What is it?" I showed her. She stared at it, lips parted. "That's him," she whispered. "I don't know that," I said carefully, "but I know what it's meant to do." Emily's voice shook. "Scare you?" I nodded. "And isolate me." I forwarded the message to James and Lillian with one line. "Received today. Documenting." Then I set my phone down and sat with Emily in the quiet. For the first time since the gala, I felt something that wasn't fear. It was a kind of calm that comes when you stop hoping a person will change and start preparing for who they already are. Because Richard Whitmore thought the world would only ever see me as a man trying to climb. He didn't realize I'd learned how to stand still. And once the subpoenas hit, once the footage was pulled, once the paper trail was laid out, his version of the story wouldn't survive daylight. 2 weeks passed with my life on pause. That's what paid administrative leave feels like when you didn't do anything wrong. Like someone hit mute on your future, and you're supposed to act grateful because you're still getting a check. Every morning, I woke up before my alarm like my body didn't trust sleep anymore. The apartment smelled like coffee and quiet. Emily moved around gently, like she was afraid one wrong sound would crack me open. Some days she cooked. Some days she just stared at her phone, fighting the habit of answering her father's calls like it was a reflex in her bones. And in the middle of all that waiting, Richard kept trying to control the story. He didn't send long messages. He sent short ones, sharp, confident little taps on the glass. "You're making a mistake. This will pass if you stop fighting. You're embarrassing the family." And every time, I did the same thing. Screenshot, save, forward to James, forward to Lillian. No arguing, no explaining, no begging. Just proof. Because the truth doesn't need a performance. It needs a record. The day the footage arrived. The subpoena process wasn't fast. Nothing official ever is. But when the Meridian Ballroom finally released the preserved footage to the city attorney's office, Lillian called me herself. "Malik," she said, voice even, "we received video from the gala." My stomach tightened so hard it felt like I swallowed a stone. "Okay. We're going to review it with you and your representative present," she said. "Today, if you can." Emily was sitting across the table from me when I got off the phone. She watched my face like she could read the outcome in my eyes. "It's the footage," I said. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." I grabbed my keys. "Come with me." She stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. On the drive downtown, the city looked too normal. People crossing streets with grocery bags, kids dragging backpacks, a man washing a storefront window like the world hadn't shifted under my feet. I kept thinking, all this life moving, and my name is hanging in an office like a question mark. In the compliance conference room, Victor sat at my side. James was on speakerphone, patched in. The city attorney brought in a laptop and a hard drive. Lillian didn't waste time. Malik, she said, we're going to start at coat check and the main ballroom entry. This footage has no audio. The screen flickered. There we were, Emily and me, standing near the exit. And then Richard entered frame. He moved exactly the way I remembered. Relaxed, confident, like every square foot belonged to him. He hugged Emily. And in the hug, clear as day, his hand slid to the back of her dress where her phone was tucked in her clutch. He pulled it free smoothly, like he'd done it 1,000 times. Emily made a small sound beside me, like air escaping. On camera, Richard turned away from us with her phone already in his hand. Not hidden, not panicked, casual. He walked toward the bar area, where the lighting was softer. The footage switched angles. Now it showed Richard leaning against a high-top table with Emily's phone in both hands, thumbs moving. He wasn't scrolling mindlessly. He was typing. He paused, glanced around, typed again. Then he slipped the phone into his jacket pocket. My whole body went cold. The city attorney stopped the video. "Time stamp," he said. Lillian read it off the screen. 9:38 to 9:40. I felt my pulse in my throat. The forged email was sent at 9:39. Victor exhaled a low, slow breath. There it is. Emily's face had gone pale. She was staring at the screen like she was watching her childhood replay in high definition. Lillian continued, voice steady. We also have footage of him returning the device to Emily at coat check. The video resumed. Richard approached us, smiling, and placed the phone back into Emily's hand like a gentleman returning something precious. And Emily, on camera, took it. Not because she agreed. Because she had been trained too. Emily's shoulders shook. I reached for her hand under the table, squeezing once. James's voice came through the speaker, low and controlled. That's unauthorized access at minimum, and it supports the timeline. Malik, you're going to be cleared. The city attorney didn't promise anything. He didn't say, congratulations. He just nodded, face unreadable, and said, this is significant. Significant. A word that suddenly sounded like oxygen. The truth leaves the room. The next 48 hours moved in a way the last 2 weeks hadn't. Compliance interviewed me again, briefly this time, mostly to confirm details and collect my documentation logs. It confirmed my city account hadn't been accessed successfully. They also documented the external attempts and the timestamps. The city attorney requested additional communications from Whitmore Development, including the email they claimed was my solicitation. Their complaint now looked less like a report and more like a weapon. And then, this part still makes my throat tighten, the city cleared me. Lillian called on a Friday afternoon. Malik, she said, the preliminary review has determined there is no evidence you solicited compensation or attempted to influence procurement. Your administrative leave will be lifted effective Monday. I sat down at the kitchen table because my legs suddenly forgot they were holding me. Emily's eyes filled before I even spoke. I'm cleared, I said quietly. Emily let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and covered her face with both hands. Thank God, she whispered. But it wasn't just relief I felt. It was grief. Because even when you're cleared, you don't get back the days you lived under suspicion. You don't get back the way your coworkers looked at you differently. You don't get back the small shame your body absorbs even when your mind knows you did nothing wrong. You just keep going. And you decide what you're going to do with the truth. The public consequence. Richard thought he could keep this inside, family. He was wrong about one thing, my silence. But he was also wrong about another. The city was angry. Not in an emotional way. In a procedural way, the kind that shows up in letters and referrals and meetings with people who don't care what your last name is. Within a week, Whitmore Development was formally removed from consideration for the bid under an integrity review. Not because they were found guilty of bribery. Those processes take time. But because the complaint and contact pattern raised enough concern to make the city step back. Then the Whitmore Foundation board got involved. That part shocked me, because I'd assumed people like Richard were untouchable in their own circles. But boards don't love you. They love stability. Richard's harassment didn't look like family drama. Once the timeline was documented and the footage existed, it looked like risk. And risk makes donors nervous. The first time it hit the news, it wasn't dramatic. It was a small article online, buried under politics and sports. City clears employee and procurement complaint, vendor under review. No mention of race, no mention of boy, just facts. But facts have a way of traveling. Someone connected the dots. Richard Whitmore, Whitmore Development, the Whitmore Foundation Gala, and then the story grew legs. A local reporter requested public records. Another paper picked it up. A clip from the gala circulated. Someone had filmed part of Richard's speech earlier that night, the community project's comment. Not enough to prove the setup, but enough to show the tone. And when the footage of him taking Emily's phone became part of a legal filing, redacted where necessary, still unmistakable, people stopped calling it misunderstanding. They called it what it was. Control, coercion, retaliation. The night it truly flipped, Andrew called Emily again, voice tight, no warmth left. He said, Dad's being asked to step down from the foundation. The board says he's bringing unwanted attention. Emily's laugh was small and bitter. He created the attention. Andrew swallowed hard. He says Malik is doing this to punish him. I took the phone from Emily, not rudely, just calmly, and said, Andrew, the only thing I did was refuse to be framed quietly. There was a pause. Then Andrew said something that surprised me. I watched the footage, he admitted, voice low. He took your email from Emily's phone. My jaw tightened. Yeah. Andrew exhaled like the truth cost him. I didn't want to believe it. Emily's voice broke. I've been living with it my whole life. Andrew didn't argue this time. He just said, quieter, I'm sorry. And I realized something in that moment. Richard didn't just control Emily. He controlled the whole family's silence. What happened to Diane? The piece that mattered most to Emily wasn't the board or the headlines. It was her mother. With James's guidance, Emily petitioned for formal involvement in Diane's care decisions. Nothing aggressive, nothing theatrical. Just the kind of paperwork that says, I am her daughter and I will not be erased. Marissa, the facility administrator, documented Diane's preference during a lucid morning. Diane said, clearly, I want Emily to visit. I want Emily informed. That wasn't a victory that made the news. But it was the victory that let Emily breathe. Richard tried to push back at first, complained, threatened, acted offended like boundaries were violence. But once the foundation started wobbling and his own lawyers told him to stop creating evidence against himself, his energy changed. He didn't become kind. He became cautious. And cautious men are easier to manage than cruel ones. Emily started visiting Diane twice a week. Some days Diane remembered everything. Some days she forgot Emily's name and still held her hand like she knew her heart. Emily stopped pretending that love meant tolerating control. And slowly, the fear in her eyes began to loosen its grip. My revenge. People online love the word revenge because it sounds like fire. Mine didn't look like fire. It looked like me sitting at my kitchen table at midnight, building a timeline. It looked like me refusing to argue and choosing to document. It looked like me recusing myself even when it bruised my pride, because protection mattered more than ego. It looked like me and my wife resetting accounts, changing passwords, cutting off access, and learning the difference between privacy and secrecy. And in the end, it looked like Richard Whitmore learning the one lesson he never thought he'd have to learn. You cannot humiliate someone into silence if they are willing to let the truth stand taller than their fear. The healing. The Monday I returned to City Hall, the lobby smelled the same. Burnt coffee, floor polish, the faint metallic scent of the security gates. But I didn't. Denise met me by the elevators, holding my badge. She handed it to me without ceremony. Then she looked me in the eye. "Welcome back," she said. "Thank you," I replied. She paused, then added quietly, "You handled this like a professional. I hope you know that." I nodded once. My throat was tight. At my desk, my computer monitor still had a fingerprint mark on the corner of the screen I hadn't noticed before. I wiped it off slowly, like I was wiping off the last trace of being treated like a suspect. That evening, Emily and I ate dinner at our small table, real dinner this time, not cereal. The apartment smelled like garlic and roasted vegetables. Soft jazz played from the speaker, low enough to feel like a blanket. Emily reached for my hand. "I'm sorry," she said again, but this time it wasn't the frantic apology of a woman trying to keep the peace. It was quieter, clearer. "I know," I said. Then she added, "I started therapy." I blinked. "You did?" She nodded. "I need to learn who I am without his voice in my head, and I need to learn how to be your wife without asking you to shrink." The honesty in that hit me harder than any headline. "I'm proud of you," I said, and I meant it. We didn't fix everything overnight. We still had tense moments. Sometimes Emily would freeze when her phone buzzed, like she expected it to be her father reclaiming space. Sometimes I'd wake up from dreams where I was back in that ballroom, hearing "boy" echo while everybody smiled. Healing isn't clean. But it's possible. And it starts when you stop calling harm normal. Closing audience reflection. I used to think the worst thing that could happen to me was being insulted in public. Now I know the worst thing is being insulted and then being expected to carry that insult quietly, so other people can stay comfortable. Richard Whitmore tried to use my skin as a shortcut to shame. He tried to use my job as a lever. He tried to use my wife's love for her mother as a chain. And the truth is, for a moment, it almost worked, because silence is powerful when it's been trained into you. But I learned something I'll carry for the rest of my life. You don't beat a man like that by screaming louder than him. You beat him by making the truth impossible to bury. If this story meant something to you, hit like and subscribe, not for me, but because stories like this remind people they're not alone when power tries to rewrite their reality. And I want to ask you one question, honestly. If you were in my position, humiliated, then framed, would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace? Or would you have done what I did and fought with proof? Tell me in the comments.